Hey there, and welcome to Dating After 50 with Robin and Julie. And I'm Robin, and while Julie isn't with me on this one, I promise she'll be with us in spirit and hopefully back on the mic soon. This podcast is a space for real talk for all of us who are navigating love, dating, and relationships in our fabulous 50s and beyond. I am the beyond part, I'm in my 60s. So, whether you're newly single, coming out of a long term relationship, or just trying to figure out what love looks like now, you're not alone. We are in this together. Today's episode is all about leveling up your standards in dating. This is one of those juicy topics that people love to talk about and also kind of avoid because it really brings up everything from the past, the regrets, to that little voice that says, "Am I asking for too much?" And here is a spoiler alert, you're not. So grab your coffee, tea, wine, or sparkling water and let's get into it. All right, let me start with the basics. What do I mean when I say standards? To me, standards are the baseline, they're the foundation for how we allow people to treat us. They reflect how much we value ourselves and how much we trust that love is possible in the way we want it to be. It's very important to say this. Standards are not the same as preferences. So let's break it down. A preference might be I want someone who's over 6 feet tall, in finance, has a trust fund. You get it, you've heard that. Or I'd love a guy who plays guitar or listens to Metallica. Nothing wrong with preferences, I'm telling you, but they're flexible, they're negotiable. Standards are different, they're core. They're the things that make you feel safe, seen, and respected in a relationship. Things like, I will only date someone who communicates consistently. I will not tolerate emotional unavailability. I need someone who respects my independence and doesn't play games. Standards protect your peace. And at our age, honey, our peace is precious, right? So let me tell you a little bit about what this has looked like in my own life. So buckle in. When I was younger, in my 20s and 30s, my standards were really just hopes. Does this sound familiar to you? I didn't enforce them. I just wanted someone to be kind, emotionally available, who followed through. But I made so many excuses for people who didn't show up that way. It was almost like I wanted someone to choose me, and it really didn't matter. you know, my mother trained me to like go for the men who are really good looking, educated, and, to be frankly honest, wealthy. Did I find that? No. Anyway, I remember dating a guy, and this is later after my divorce, who would not spend nearly as much time with me as I wanted. He would say, I like my time, I like my space. And when I broke it down to the amount of time we were spending, it was very little. We dated 3.5 years, and I think we spent 2 whole weekends together. Is that acceptable? No, but I accepted that. I talked myself into believing that I was being too needy, I was being too much. Another thing was when I dated somebody else, they would disappear for days, and that was avoidance. It wasn't aligned on how I wanted to be loved. Another person I dated would say all the right things. You're amazing. I can't believe someone like you is single, which I hate, by the way, but never made actual plans. It was all words and no action. And I was kind of confused. I was like, well, you're telling me I'm amazing, but yet you can't make a plan. And here's what I learned: confusion is a red flag. If you don't know where you stand, you have to match the actions and the words, not just the words. So I don't chase clarity anymore. If it's not clear, it's a no. In fact, a few weeks ago, I had a guy who we talked on the phone, had a great connection. He would text, and then all of a sudden he would disappear, and then he would say, when do you want to get together? So I'd give him dates, and then it would be crickets. Finally, I said, you know what? I'm leveling up my standards. This is not acceptable to me. So I just blocked and deleted and went on my way. Because if it's not a clear yes, it's a no. Leveling up my standards has meant saying no a lot more often. It's meant letting go of people who were almost right, but it also meant that I feel so much more confident and grounded in who I am and what I deserve. Believe me, saying no is powerful. It's probably the biggest superpower you might have in dating. So, why is it so important after 50 and beyond? Well, when we were younger, this was subtle or not so subtle messaging that we had to lock someone down by a certain age. I know I got that message. That our value was somehow tied to being partnered. I know for me, I kept thinking, oh my God, all my friends are getting married. So what happened? I settled for the first person who showed interest in me consistently. But guess what? Now we know better. We've had relationships, maybe even marriages. We've had kids. We have careers. We have had life experiences that have taught us what we want and, more importantly, what we don't want. And we've earned the right to be discerning. Our time is more valuable now. Our energy is sacred. And honestly, we've got less tolerance for BS, and that is a good thing. But here's the catch. Sometimes we fall into old habits. We still make exceptions. We still think, well, maybe I'm being too picky. Or maybe it taps into that I don't want to be alone thing and all that. But let me say this with love. Having standards is not about being picky, it's being clear. If someone makes you feel anxious more than they make you feel excited, that's your intuition talking. If someone disappears and reappears like a magician, that's a trick you don't need to fall for anymore. So, how do you actually get clear on your standards? And this is going to take a little bit. And I want you to really think about these next few questions and maybe pull out your journals or just pause this for a minute after the question and really think about these next questions and how you would answer them. So, the first question is, what are my 5 non negotiables in a relationship? Think values, communication style, emotional availability, lifestyle. This should be something that you really are clear on. What have I tolerated in the past that I will never tolerate again? And this could be emotional neglect, breadcrumbing, hot and cold behavior, basic avoidance. And how do I want to feel in my next relationship? Safe, cherished, relaxed. Write down the words that come to you and measure everything against them. In fact, maybe get a little, go get them laminated, so you can pull them out, pull out your little checklist and be like, is this what's happening here? Because remember, we might dive into old habits and old thoughts, but we really want to be clear that a no is a no. So here's one of my current standards. If a man doesn't initiate consistent communication, I'm not pursuing it, period. I am done over functioning. Just done. And this happened recently. I had a nice conversation with someone on the phone, and the next day he texted good morning, I texted good morning, and that was it. There was no more communication, there was nothing. And I'm like, okay, I'm not reaching out again. Anyway, It's okay because you know what? If someone doesn't show curiosity about who I am, not just about what I do, that's a no. I want a partner, not an audience. I have you guys for that. Defining your standards also helps you to say more confidently when the right person shows up. I can say yes because I'll recognize alignment when I see it. So, getting that confident yes is better than, I don't know. Hold on to your standards because you're going to be tempted, especially when you've decided right now that you're going to create your standard list and you're going to stick to it. But let's be real. Sometimes someone comes along who's almost everything. They're charming, they're attractive, they say the right things, but there's one big thing missing. They're emotionally available, or maybe they don't want a committed relationship, or they just can't communicate consistently. And part of you says, well, maybe I can live with that. That's when it gets hard. That's when having standards is tested. And believe me, the universe will test you. But here's the truth. Every time you say no, and you don't have to get mad about it, you just say no to what's almost right, you make space for what's actually right. And I want you to hear this again. When you say no to what's almost right, you make space for what's actually right. You send a message to the universe and to yourself that you are serious about your worth. Hold the line. Trust that your standards are there to protect your hearts. And those of you that are listening who are afraid to be alone, your heart is in jeopardy when you settle for less than what your standards should be. So here is the heart of what I want you to remember today. Having standards isn't being about hard to please. It's about being easy to please by the right person. Your standards are an extension of your self-worth. You don't have to justify your standards to anyone. You just have to honor them. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. DM me, email me, or even leave a review telling me about the standards you've set or the ones that you're working on setting. Because you deserve love that meets you where you are, not love that requires you to shrink to fit. And if you're enjoying this episode, stay tuned for next week's episode, Dating Green Flags After 50, signs that someone is worth your time and energy. And until next time, I'm Robin, and I'm cheering you on in love and life. And thanks for listening to Dating After 50 with Robin and Julie.